Okay, so Star Wars: The Rise of the Skywalker. I want to get this out of the way. I was never excited about this movie. I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but something about this film was so inherently unappealing from the start. Force Awakens was appealing because it had this youthful light to the film. Disney was restarting the franchise. It looked exciting. What could they do with it? I watched it. I was satisfied. It was basically a new hope, just for a new generation. So, what is the Rise of the Skywalkers? Well, it's basically the answer to Last Jedi. Oh yeah, I saw Last Jedi, and I was very mixed. I was probably right down the middle, like everyone else, because I thought, this whole thing is just like set up to what, and it was just all over the place. Not trying to make a Last Jedi review, but that brings us to this. That brings us to Rise of the Skywalker. Rise of the Skywalker could have worked, and it could have saved the Last Jedi, which I just thought, hey, if this leads somewhere, then I will excuse Rian Johnson. But it's not his fault. It's the entire Star Wars team managed to just have a mental breakdown, and they completely failed to deliver a coherent story. I mean, Lawrence Kasdan has written many of the great Star Wars films. He's written A New Hope. I'm sorry, he wrote Return of the Jedi, and he wrote Empire Strikes Back. And he also wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark. These are fun, adventurous movies. The best of the franchise. One of my favorites is Return of the Jedi. I love the spirit of that. I love the fun characters, the Ewoks. That is an epic film to me, Return of the Jedi. And a movie like this sells tickets before it's even released, before it even announces its title. So it's more than just a film. It's more than just a franchise. This is a generational landmark in the field of entertainment. And over time, this has spawned more products, more spin-off materials. This is billed as the final film in the Skywalker saga. I mean, they could really just say that anytime. But this is meant to serve as a conclusion to a 9-film narrative that stretched for over 40 years. That said, the film is required to do a lot, but it can't seem to do it in a primarily entertaining or cohesive fashion. There's a way to make a conclusive saga with a well-paced adventure story that can also answer long-awaited questions, but this film seems to defer on its own path. To be fair, it's hard to pull off a satisfying story and make all the fans happy, but for the most popular film series ever made, their heads should know, and they should be way more together in this than the game. Their heads are all over the place. This feels like a tapestry of some wild, intriguing ideas spattered across a blank canvas. This is the most convoluted film since Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. The movie has problems blending serious elements with lighter elements. It's much darker than most previous films, literally. This movie, I couldn't see shit. This is the darkest color grading, which ruined it. J.J. Abrams' film was appropriately titled The Force Awakens, and it just launched a new storyline. It used A New Hope as a blueprint, giving us that nostalgic, familiar arc and new characters. This is a passionless conclusion, with a final scene that mimics Titanic, and a stale modern tribute to Return of the Jedi. It replays the hits, sowing its bare new thread of storylines through a heap of forced cameos and clunky, yawn-inducing obstacles. I mean, there's a sprawling candy-colored mythos laid out in the original story, and similar to HBO's Watchmen series, it likes to just kind of make things, just take things and add in its own mythology. I mean, it likes to add cool things to make the film maybe pop out more, but The Last Jedi suffered from an inconsistent tone. It was an inspired metal piece, and it was an urge to break away from the setting and dynamics The Force Awakens established. And The Rise of Skywalker is clearly an attempt at meddling two different films together for one conclusive piece. It adds callbacks, backstories, and cameos from many other Star Wars locations in the canon. There's the new addition of humor. Some cast members from previous entries are reduced to supporting characters. I mean, Rose Tico's in this for a minute. It is really noticeable. And even if you don't like her character, which I didn't, I was very surprised and angry that they built up this character to be so major and then they just completely threw her into the background. It was not only insulting, it's insulting to the story, so it really takes away. You know, consistency is a problem with this series, and the attempt to build a final chapter with the pieces this has feels like a rushed final product, trying to assemble all its best figures without a satisfying, balanced plot to mesh them. The Force Awakens may feel procedural, as does Disney's entire roster of box office hits, but it works with fulfilled arcs, and that was just the first film. From there, we've slipped around the finality of our characters, who are Rey's parents. What is the relationship between her and Kylo? How will Poe and Chewie save the day? The series is built on questions and trying to find answers in the sequels. In some cases, big mystery boxes like Snoke got axed off in the last movie, and this film can't really help but do in some big storylines. And they are stronger. This film could have been edited to make it stronger, but they are just padded out in these final battle sequences, which oh my god, I hated the final battle sequences. Rey and Kylo battling on that massive floating arc, is, it's just so visually artificial. There's such a lack of personal investment due to the way these characters just fly and smack each other with lightsabers, only for you to know they will return in another scene. I wouldn't have a problem with Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley standing on a CG rock while all the disastrous waves crash around them if the story meant something. The battle scenes are poorly crafted because there's no emotional heft. The word fan service has been thrown around a lot. Pretty much because, unlike the previous films where this actually had a role to play in the plot, this film tacks it on to add a sense of connection. There's some awful humor and some terrible attempts to forge likable characters with cardboard dialogue, such as Oscar Isaac's Poe and his relationship with a masked rebel in the Spice Runner scene. By the way, I discovered a lot of these actors through the films. Adam Driver, Daisy Ridley, they're great, but you can see they don't have a lot to work with. Had I not seen Driver as Black Klansman, I would have just built him as the angry bored guy. And Ridley just seems to be constantly agitated through this whole three-series arc. What started as a fun world building has quickly descended into jabbering, painstaking scene assembly where characters stand quietly in dark rooms and explain things for long periods of time. There are many scenes of exposition and not enough engaging action spectacle. The threat from the Emperor adventure, too, isn't compelling or delved into enough to draw my interest for the whole 141 minutes. I mean, they bring up Palpatine like he's some guy you're supposed to really care about. You are, but I'm like, isn't he dead since 1983? I mean, why do we care? Why are you bringing back Palpatine? Write something new. Lucasfilms. It's an incredibly tedious adventure, much like The Phantom Menace or even The Last Jedi. There aren't that many fun scenes is the big problem. We want to see X-Wing chases, big monsters attacking, inspired storytelling, but this is a stilted extended finale that severs the dynamics and character arcs we started with for a rushed grand finale. It's interesting to see the positive reviews achieved by Disney's Endgame, which followed a stale formula that put me to sleep but caught on with the general public. This movie's tonal differentiation from the rest of the series clearly derailed people's attention. I didn't dislike every part of this film. I think there are some strong ideas scattered in there, but they're buried under the weight of this film's own devotion to please you. This could very well click in a few years with audiences not clamoring off expectations of the Skywalker saga and going it cold, but it's still very stilted and stale. J.J. Abrams has not crashed, but he hasn't ascended this towards where he could have brought the series. Overall, very mixed on this film. It feels like an ambitious but messy part 2 to The Last Jedi, an uneven film trilogy. But we will see how it holds up in years to come. I can see people going lighter on this over time, but it's just so boring and stale compared to any other Star Wars film. Yeah. I would rather watch the holiday special. Not kidding. Yeah. Anyway, that's my review for this film. Thank you for watching.